the recording has now started. If there are any other questions, I think that we're all good. I'm going to leave the room, and you all are free to start, and I'll talk to you in like an hour-ish, okay? All right, good luck. Y'all are going to crush it. I'm so excited for you.
So my roadmap is contention 1, inherency, then harms rights, harms economy, and insolvency. For this speech, we'll need 3 pieces of paper, 1 for rights, 1 for economy, and 1 for solvency. Contention 1 is inherency. Pretrial detention has increased 5-fold since 1970. For-profit bail bond companies are driving this increase, impacting poor communities the most. DeGerd and Sovola, 2019. Since 1970, the number of people who are detained while awaiting trial, the pretrial population has increased more than 5-fold. The pretrial population now accounts for approximately 2/3 of people in jail nationwide. A significant driver of the growing number of people in jail awaiting trial has been a paradigm shift toward financial conditions of pretrial release. Thus, the plan the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in the United States by eliminating money bail. Moving on to the second piece of paper. Contention 2 is harms rights. A, money bail is a biased system that discriminates on the basis of race and economic class. Doyle and L, 2019. By nature, money bail discriminates against low-income people through bond amounts that are either burdensome or unaffordable. Implicit and explicit racial biases make this worse. Money bail is imposed more often on Black defendants than white defendants, and Black defendants receive higher bail amounts than white defendants. Next, B, money bail violate afforded by the 14th Amendment constitutional protections. Doyle L, 2019. The Supreme Court has held that the Constitution prohibits states from depriving individuals of their liberty on the basis of wealth. A bail scheme violates the 14th Amendment if, without a court's meaningful consideration of ability to pay and alternative methods of assuring appearance at trial, it results in the detention of indigent defendants pre-trial. Next, C, undermining the rule of law destroys just leadership, also called hegemony. Schmidt, 2018. In a liberal hegemonic order, order is also established and maintained through the exercise of power by the leading state, but power is used to create a system of rule that weaker and secondary states agree to join. Liberal hegemonic order relies on shared interest in the rule of law. The liberal hegemonic order is characterized by a high degree of constitutionalism. That is, state power is embedded in a system of rules and institutions that restrain and circumscribe its exercise. The maintains liberal international order as well as legitimacy is contingent upon the hegemon abiding by the rules and institutions that it helped to create in the first place. Next, D. Strongest hegemony prevents global war. Calixtus, 2011. The longest period of peace among the great powers has been the era of U.S. leadership. By contrast, multipolar systems have been unstable, resulting in frequent crises and major wars among the great powers. Moving on to the second piece of paper, contention 3, harms economy. Maintaining pretrial detention costs $140 billion a year. Pretrial Justice Institute, 2017. Jailing arrested people before trial is the greatest expense generated by current pretrial justice practice. Taxpayers spend approximately $38 million per day to jail people who are awaiting trial. Annually, this $14 billion is used to detain people who are mostly low risk, including many whose charges will ultimately be dropped. That money could pay for a bevy of other needed services. This is, however, just a portion of the total price. The collateral cost have been estimated to be as high as $10 per every $1 in direct cost. This suggests that the true cost of existing money-based pretrial systems is closer to $140 billion per year. Next, B, pretrial incarceration traps people in poverty, loss of jobs, housing, and children. Coalition to End Money Bond, 2019. Pretrial incarceration causes people to lose their jobs, housing, and even custody of their children. The individuals and communities harmed by these practices are disproportionately Black, brown, and impoverished. Next, C, economic inequality and poverty slow the entire economy and unravels political stability. Agraham, citing a UN study, 2020. Unequal societies grow more slowly and are less successful at sustaining economic growth, as numerous studies have shown. As economic conditions deteriorate in lower and middle classes, we may get to a point where our critical mass of populations can no longer afford the iPhones and cool apps and free shipping that are driving our economy. Next, D, economic decline to global war. Asymmetric, Townsend, 2015. Asymmetrical or unbalanced dependencies and negative trade expectations may generate tensions leading to trade wars among interdependent states that in turn increase the risk of military conflict. If leaders seriously fear or anticipate their own nation's decline, then they may appeal to anti-foreign sentiments, contemplate the use of force to gain respect or credibility, adopt protectionist policies, and ultimately refuse to be deterred. So the dangerous shift could happen abruptly. Moving on to contention for solvency, this is your third piece of paper. No justification for money bail. Empirically, defendants that reappear for trial without bail. The only way solve the injustice is eliminating money bail. Zoyan L. 2019. Money bail is not necessary to ensure that defendants reappear for trial. Most defendants who are released from custody pending trial will appear for their court dates without any financial incentive, and that many of those who miss a court appearance do so for mundane reasons such as lack of reliable transportation, illness, or inability to leave work or find childcare, rather than out of a desire to escape justice. In Santa Clara County, which has taken steps to rely less on money bail and release more people pre-trial, more than 95% of defendants reappear in court. Rather than eliminate money bail, some jurisdictions have attempted to forbid judges from imposing unaffordable bail. But so long as money bail remains a possible condition of release, some judges may continue to illegally detain people on unaffordable bonds. That's time. Open for cross-ex.
What is money bail?
Money bail is a system in which someone agrees to pay an amount of money decided by the judge that they will lose if they don't show up to their trial. Money bail is designed to ensure that the defendant will show up to their trial because they risk losing a large sum of money if they do not.
What is hegemony and how is it related to the U.S.?
Hegemony is the amount of leadership dominance you have compared to other countries, and it is important for the U.S. In order to prevent global war.
What is pretrial incarceration?
Pretrial incarceration is when an accused person in a criminal case is kept in jail before the trial has taken place, either because of a failure to post bail or due to denial of release.
And how does cash bail hurt the poor?
Cash bail hurts the poor because people who are less wealthy do not have the opportunity to pay the bail decided by the judge. And since these people are not able to pay the bail, they go through pretrial detention, which leads to them becoming even more impoverished.
Okay, thank you.
I'm the one in C, and I will be reading on case harm rights, harm economy, and solvency, and I will also be reading the 1 in C budgets DA, so you will need to have one more piece of flow paper. Harm rights. 1. No impact. Money bail balances the rights of the accused and the public. This important balance is protected by the Constitution. The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled money bail to be constitutional. Seidler and Snead, 2017. Money bail has deep historical roots in law and custom. Bail solves a problem balancing the general rights of defendants to pretrial freedom. In the United States, defendants have a right to bail. The Supreme Court has repeatedly rejected constitutional challenges to the use of money bail. 2. Eliminating money bail threatens public safety and prevents victims from being witnesses and helping investigations. Shea, 2020. These are not the type of offenders who should be free to continue their criminal activity. Judges should assess their risk to public safety. Violent criminals are being returned to the community and will know the names of their accusers and where to find them. The likely outcome will be fewer people coming forward to help police build solid cases against criminals. 3. No impact. United States hegemony does not prevent wars, causes endless wars and greater instability throughout the world. The cost of liberal hegemony begins with the endless wars. A liberal state ends up fighting to spread liberal democracy around the world. The presence of a powerful state prone to fighting war after war increases the amount of conflict in the international system, creating instability. They often interfere in the politics of other countries. A country that embraces liberal hegemony ends up doing more harm than good to itself, as well as other countries. Moving on to harm economy, which is your second piece of flow paper. 1. Money bail systems are good for taxpayers. Without money bail, the system bears the entire cost burden. Armstrong, 2018. The elimination of bail will cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The system will also miss out on a sizable amount of money from the bond industry. Removing commercial bail from the picture means that these costs are borne directly by taxpayers rather than bail agents who cost the state nothing. 2. Money bail is an equalizer. The system takes into consideration ability to pay. Alternatives wouldn't be better for people in poverty. Kennedy, 2016. Cash bail is a great equalizer. The alternatives to cash bail are to hold people throughout trial, often years, or to release them on their own recognizance. The law already affords defendants the right to appeal an excessive amount of bail. These reforms would only give judges two bad options: release an offender who flees or hold unjustly the innocent. 3. Alternative causes. The affirmative cannot overcome the three main reasons of increasing economic inequality: technology, globalization, and a decline of working class political power. Deloitte, 2017. Technology replaces workers. U.S. workers faced intense competition from abroad, and there is some research relating the rise in inequality to the decline of working class political power. 4. No impact. Global institutions safeguard against conflict during an economic decline. Dresner, 2012. Current institutional environment is much thicker with status quo policies focused on promoting greater economic openness. Structures also serve to blunt domestic pressures to act in a more unilateral manner. Moving on to solvency, which is your third flow sheet. 1. No solvency. Empirically, money bail elimination results use of risk assessment algorithms based on fundamentally flawed data influenced by structural racism. Eliminating bail does not solve the structural issues that the affirmative claims. Carlisle, 2018. The Whereas the algorithms perpetuate racial disparities within the criminal justice system. The algorithms are fundamentally flawed because the data they use to predict a person's risk are influenced by structural racism. 2. Ending money bail leads to more pretrial detention. Tabarrok, 2018. Money bail actually helps to alleviate these trade-offs. Bail reformers force judges to either release or hold. Eliminating money bail is a crude and dangerous approach. 3. Solvency turn. The politics of criminal justice reform make lasting reform, like eliminating money bail, ineffective. Officials like judges and prosecutors are elected and have an incentive to seem harsh on crime. PATH, 2018. So it's actually cheaper to be harsher and shift the costs away from the county to the state prison system. Incentives that make harshness politically safe. As political incentives remain in place, reforms start to crumble. Moving on to budgets, which is your fourth piece of flow paper. A uniqueness. State and local governments' budgets are on the brink now. Any new and unplanned spending means cuts must be made. Those cuts would be to education. Kenny and Bickeland, 2020. K-12 education and healthcare make up the largest parts of the state budget, and we'll see programs either suspended or canceled. Any money that states hold onto for itself must go to the expense as a result of COVID-19. B. Link. Systems and technology needed to end money bail are very expensive. Yakin, 2019. That will mean upgraded computers and systems to handle the sheer volume of materials, additional staff to handle document review and organization, and longer hours for prosecutors, police, and the defense if money bail is eliminated, all on the taxpayer's dime. This anticipates a 70% increase in hearings and trials. See internal link. Strong public schools are necessary for democratic stability. Stitzland, 2017. Public schools are intricately connected to the stability and vitality of our democracy in the U.S. Democracies take work. They rely upon the ongoing effort of elected officials and citizens. In order to maintain it, we have to educate children about its benefits and rationale, while also equipping them with the skills and dispositions they need in order for them to perpetuate it well. Democracy requires informed and active voters who seek information to make wise decisions. D. Impact. U.S. democracy is necessary to prevent large-scale wars. Epstein et al. 2007. Democracies do not go to war with one another. Democracies promote economic prosperity. This leads to more stable society, and as equal economic opportunity for all helps to spur economic activity and economic growth. Democracies are viewed as being more likely to honor treaties. That's the end of my time. I'm open for cross-sects.
So, what points are you trying to make in your first contention rights?
In my first card, we are trying to say that the money bail balances the rights of defendants and the public by requiring them to pay bail. And we are also stating that cash bail is constitutional because the Supreme Court stated that it was. Our second card states that going through with the plan would allow dangerous criminals to roam the streets. And the third card is saying that U.S. hegemony is bad because it isn't effective in deterrence.
Okay, thank you. Why does the system of cash bail not lead to an economic decline?
The system of cash bail does not lead to an economic decline because there are certain economic institutions that are preventing this from happening, such as the G20. Also, history such as the Great Depression shows that your impact has no magnitude because it was in an entirely different situation and the status quo was different.
Okay, thank you. What is the main argument you're making in your solvency turn?
The argument I'm making in my solvency turn is that because of how cash bail is perceived politically, the plan will be ineffective. Right now, judges and prosecutors want to be harsh on crime because it can save money and gives them a good reputation.
Okay, end of cross-X.
Thank you.
So I am going to be doing rights, economy, solvency, and budgets. And all of these are flow sheets that you already have, so you'll be needing those. Starting with rights. Circumstances. 1. Sending money has no effect on court appearances, but is used to target people of color. Lockhart, 19. A February study from researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and George Mason University found that the elimination of cash bail for dozens of offenses in Philadelphia has zero effect on court appearances. Next. 2. Principles of non-discrimination and judicial systems with full access to justice is the foundation of the rule of law. United Nations, 2019. The principles of equality and non-discrimination are the foundations of the rule of law. The International Human Rights Legal Framework contains international instruments to combat specific forms of discriminations. Next. 3. Money bail is wealth discrimination. It treats poor people unfairly, has lasting consequences, and violates constitutional principles. Criminal Justice Policy Program 16. More than 50% of jail inmates held on total case disposition remained in jail because they couldn't afford bail of $2,500 or less. 31% remained incarcerated on money bail amounts of $500 or less. Most of these people are among the poorest sort of Americans. Next. 4. Money bail violates multiple constitutional rights. ACLU. Current bail practices are unconstitutional and violating due process rights and equal protection under the 14th Amendment, the prohibition against excessive bail in the 8th Amendment, and the right to a speedy trial guaranteed by the 6th Amendment. Next, 5. Pretrial detention defendants have worse outcomes in their cases. The psychological trauma is also devastating. Unequal 19. Pretrial detention has dramatically negative effects on the outcome of the defendant's case. Those who are held pretrial are 4 times more likely to be sentenced to prison than defendants who are prior to trial. Next, 6. Institutions and rule of law are necessary for liberal democracies, international order, and U.S. leadership. Eikenberry, 11. Order relies on shared interests and a rule of law. International order is constitutional in character. State power is embedded in a system with rules and institutions that restrain and circumscribe its exercises. Next, moving on to economy. 1. Pretrial detention is expensive for taxpayers and the system. Only the bail bondsmen are benefiting. Wing, 17. A report published this month finds that jailing these people costs U.S. taxpayers approximately $38 million every day, or $14 billion annually. Many defendants don't have enough money to pay bail and rely on commercial bail bond agencies to get out of jail. Next, 2. Bond feeds uniquely trapped poor and often innocent defendants into cycles of debt and poverty. Pretrial and justice system. 17. Maryland found that people arrested. A recent study in Maryland found that people arrested in the state of from 2011 to 2015 paid combined bail bond more premiums more than $256 million. When they were unable to pay that, their case went to debt collection. Next, 3. The economic inequality undermines economic growth. Data Gupta et al. 2017. Inequality has risen in several advanced economies. Research at the MIF makes it clear that persistent lack of inclusion could frayed social cohesion and undermine growth. Next, 4. The 2008 recession doesn't prove economic decline doesn't lead to war. It brought us to the brink. The next major economic decline will erupt into a global military conflict, further fueled by economic inequality. Liu, 18. Monetary stimulus is an adrenaline to shot pump the unarrested heart. It can revive the patient, but it does nothing to cure the disease. As monetary tightening reveals the vulnerabilities in the real economy, the collapse of asset price bubbles will trigger another economic crisis, one that could be even more severe than the last. Next, moving on to solvency. So take out your next flow sheet. 1. Ending money bail is effective. DC proves. National legislation is needed to create a fair and effective system and a national pretrial reporting program, allowing effective reform. Data for progress. 19. DC releases 94% of people charged with crimes, of whom are just 1% be arrested for a violent offense while pending trial. The End Money Bail Act will create fairer and more effective systems than any other proposal. Moving on to answers to OPCAs, starting with budgets. Take out your budgets flow sheet. 1. Now unique. The federal government is sending relief funds directly to states to fund education during COVID, Jacobson 20. All 50 states have applied and been approved for the government's Emergency Education Relief Fund. Next, 2. No link. Ending money bail saves money. Pretrial detention is much more expensive than release and conditional release programs. Doyle et al. 19. American taxpayers spend approximately $38 million a day or $14 billion a year on pretrial detention, but release and condition release costs the country between $0 and $26 per day per person. Next, 3. No impact. The Great Recession proves that school funding is resilient and the federal government will smooth spending. Isaac, 16. The federal government compensated for most of its shortfall, providing $54 billion for a new state fiscal stabilization fund, for about 2/3 of which went to K-12 education. Congress temporarily boosted funding for federal education programs, including Title I for high-poverty schools and special education, and as a result, total spending on education remained fairly steady in 2008 to 10. Okay, that's time. I'm open for cross-ex.
So, how does cash bail work?
Well, we are saying that cash bail does not work, but the basic structure of the money bail system is that the alleged perpetrator pays an amount of money to the judge, and then the goal is to get the perpetrator to court without them fleeing or anything else.
Moving on to the next question. Why would the Constitution affect money bail?
So the cash bail system is unconstitutional because it violates the due process rights and equal protection according to the 14th Amendment. And it is not equal protection because higher class citizens.
Okay. Sorry. Next question. Who are the people involved during a trial?
There's a judge, a defendant, the prosecutor, the defendant's attorney, either public or private, the witnesses, the court reporter, and sometimes a jury.
Okay. Thank you. What are you trying to achieve through the plan?
What we are trying to achieve to get rid of the cash bail system, to make the system more equal to Black, Indigenous people of color, and also people of a lower class, because it discriminates against wealth and race.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of cross-ex.
I will be reading rights, economy, and solvency, and that means that I will be splitting the block, which is on case. That means that you will need 3 pieces of paper instead of 4. One, the U.S. Supreme Court affirms that money bail is constitutional. ABC Admin 2019. The Supreme Court has upheld the decision of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. In simple terms, this means that monetary bail meets constitutional muster. 2. New York proves that ending money bail threatens public safety. Shop 2020. Doing away with bail allows dangerous criminals to remain on the streets. The most notorious case is Tiffany Harris, a woman who was released after she hit 3 women, only to be arrested the next day and accused of an assault on another woman. 3. The risk assessments that replace money bail are unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause. Harvard Law Review 2019. The pretrial detention law is unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause because it detains people based on where they're arrested. Just as states cannot deprive poor people to criminal appeals, neither can states permit jurisdictional rules based solely on location of arrest. SB 10 provides leeway for risk assessment tools to include race and gender data, and to quantify individuals' risks based on statistics related to identity and location rather than a criminal conduct. 4. U.S. hegemony is declining. Policies to increase hegemony are dangerous, fail, and cause more destabilization. First, 2019. The U.S. looks increasingly like it is driven by emotional decision-making and irrational fears. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq not only failed, but destabilized the region, empowered hostile actors like Iran, and should have confirmed that the U.S. lacks the ability to transform societies with military force. On to economy, which is your next sheet of paper. 1. Eliminating bail hurts public safety and will decimate $2 billion industry, passing off costs to taxpayers. Lula 2019. Builders fought the legislation, saying that it would result in the release of violent offenders and decimate a $2 billion national industry. The legislature ignored not only public safety and justice, but fundamental role of the criminal justice system. Defendants must appear at trial for justice to be served. Eliminating money bail and moving to risk assessment-based decision-making leads to increased pretrial detention based on race. IBR 2018. Under cash bail, almost everyone is accused of a crime had the ability to obtain pretrial release. Advocates are concerned that risk assessment-based decision-making will lead to increased rates of pretrial detention and worsen racial disparity. Maryland reduced its reliance on cash bail through reforms that increase consideration of risk. There are some early indication that Maryland's reforms have led to an increase in pretrial detention. It's easy to forget that arrest is a co-produced outcome. Who gets arrested is related to what an individual does, but it's also related to policing. During economic decline, countries are more likely to end rivalries and turn towards cooperation. Clary 15. This paper provides evidence that economic stress is associated with policies between rivals. Data since 1915 suggests rivalries were twice as likely to terminate during an economic downturn. This research questions theories that economic downturns are associated with war and argues that peace may result from economic troubles. This is your third sheet of flow paper. Onto solvency. Bail policy is determined by state and local jurisdictions and is greatly influenced by state Supreme Court rulings and support of local stakeholders. This means that federal one-size-fits-all policy will be a less effective reform. Doyle et al. 2019. Washington, D.C. and Kentucky have been pioneers of pretrial reform for decades. Each of these jurisdictions have reshaped its pretrial processes. Much of pretrial reform focuses on state legislation and state Supreme Court rulings. Each jurisdiction continues to work to improve their pretrial practices, and none should be understood as a perfected model of reform. I am done with my speech and have more than a minute left. Open for cross-ex.
Who is the Supreme Court, as you mentioned, and what do they do?
So basically, the Supreme Court is the highest court of the federal jurisdiction, and the Supreme Court takes the most important cases and not really the less important ones.
So what would happen during an economic decline?
Well, we never stated that there would be economic decline, but in an economic decline, the stock market and employment rate will go down, and there will be a lot of overall bad effects.
All right, thank you. Next question. Why is the plan bad?
Well, the plan is bad because the money that would go towards making a new system would make major dents in the economy, specifically the education system, and the education system is key to democracy.
All right, that's all I have.
So I'm the 1NR, and I will be splitting the block with my partner, and my rebuttal will be budgets and impact calcs. The impacts of the budget's day is the end of democracy. Voters will neither be educated nor informed on the government and the candidates. Informed citizens are an essential part of democracy, and democracy prevents large-scale wars. Democracy does not start large-scale wars. To get rid of education is to get rid of our futures and our knowledge. Education is severely tied in with democracy, and we need educated voters and students. Cuts on the education system would not only impact that system, it would also impact other sectors of the country and the country as a whole. This is called, as we have stated before, the democratic peace theory. The United States is the world's superpower, and that cannot be denied. The probability of our impact is very high. The risk, as I've stated, is that the US democracy collapses, and because of that, the world erupts into chaos and war because the United States is a major superpower. The magnitude would affect everyone because it would be a worldwide conflict. Okay, that's the end of my speech.
Okay, so this is the 1AR speech. My roadmap is harms rights, harms economy, and then an impact calculus about rights and economy, and then solvency. Harms rights. Money Bill is unconstitutional. The system violates the 14th Amendment because it discriminates against people who are less wealthy and takes away their liberty without considering the defendant's ability to pay and alternative options to ensure that they will appear for trial. Money Bill is a terrible system because it is biased and it discriminates against people of color and people who are a part of the lower class of the United States. If we continue to use Money Bill, the United States hegemony will not be able to be maintained. To be a leading country in today's world, it is necessary for a country to respect its own rules and laws that it established to become successful in the first place. However, because the United States is disrespecting the 14th Amendment and not abiding by the Constitution, it is a country that is seen as weak. The United States cannot be a world leader if it does not do what is best for its citizens. Hegemony is key because it prevents global war, and we need to make sure that the United States leadership is going up instead of going down. In order to do this, we need to end cash bail. Moving on to economy. Since many people cannot afford the bail that they can pay in order to not go to jail while waiting for their trial, they have to go through pretrial detention. However, pretrial detention costs about $140 billion every year. Taxpayers have to pay $140 billion every year in order to support people going through pretrial detention who are mostly low risk and whose charges will eventually be dropped. This is a very substantial amount of money, and there are many other ways that we could use this money and fix significant issues in the United States. Not only does pretrial detention, which is often caused by money bail, cost us so much money, it also impoverishes people. And while people are in jail waiting for their trial, they lose their jobs, they lose their house, and they can even lose custody of their children. This creates a whole population of the United States that is no longer able to make and spend money, leading to economic inequality and poverty across the country. An economic decline like this will lead to global war. When a country's situation is bad, leaders of that country want to gain respect and credibility. In order to achieve this power, they will start conflict with other countries around the world. Moving on to my impact calculus about harms rights and harms economy. The impact of the rights argument and the economy argument is both global war. The time frame is the near future. Money Bill is a system that we are using right now, and it is already discriminating between rich and poor, and it is already preventing people from making and spending money. If we continue to use this system, the probability that the United States situation will worsen is high, and there will be a global war that will impact millions and millions of people from all over the world. Moving on to solvency. There are no problems with the affirmative plan. It fixes the issues that Money Bill has been putting us through and even ensures that defendants reappear for trial and that the United States criminal justice system is fair and effective. If the national government decides to eliminate money bail, every state will benefit from it. There needs to be change, and the only way to bring change is by ending money bail in the United States. Thank you.
So for my roadmap, you'll need 4 pieces of paper, and I will be going through budgets, rights, economy, and solvency. So Judge, I want to point out, first of all, that they dropped budgets, which is a big mistake, which means that they concede to our argument about how like our impact on economic decline and how cash bail costs way too much. So for budgets, we are saying that because of the ongoing economic decline, budgets are on the brink. The government is spending lots of money on matters that are important right now, such as the coronavirus. There will probably be a big impact on the state's general fund, which means that the coronavirus is a much more important matter that we have to attend to. If we were to run the plan, it's like about 100% likely that public schooling and K through 12 education will get cut. So for rights, we are trying to say that their harms rights argument has no impact because the cash bail system has many benefits, such as balancing the rights of the accused and the public. This leads to equality for all. If the cash bail system is in the Constitution, it's constitutional and there's no valid argument against it. Getting rid of the cash bail system would be dangerous and a threat to public safety. Also, the act has not introduced a functioning plan to replace the cash bail system at all. So if they have no plan to replace it, then we should not get rid of it in the first place. Also, hegemony does not prevent wars because right now we're at war with Yemen and the war is still raging even as the coronavirus comes about. So for economy, we are saying that the economy is doing bad right now, but the cash bail system is good for the economy. We need it. The system is a huge benefit for taxpayers and the whole bond industry. Alternatives to cash bail system be horrible for people in poverty, and as I have stated before, DAF does not have a valid replacement for the cash bail system. Plus, economic inequality has other sources of power that the act simply cannot control, so it will not solve. For solvency, we are trying to say that the plan does not solve because we win on harms. They have no plan at all for what they're going to do after money bail, and it will be costly and probably worse than the original plan and outline of cash bail. Therefore, you should vote for NAG. That is the end of my speech, and I have a minute left.
So I'm going to be reading rights, economy, solvency, and then budgets. In that order. Rights. Cash bail is unconstitutional. Cash bail tries to hurt people and doesn't give people their proper rights. The laws that are in place are not enforced with cash bail, which makes it unconstitutional. In going more into depth, they violate the 14th and 16th Amendment. And 6th Amendment, which means that they don't grant equal protection or take into consideration for people's needs. Moving on to economy. Your second sheet of paper. Cash bail doesn't help us in any way. It's expensive for the system and traps the poor into a cycle of poverty. With upperclassmen getting richer, middleclassmen will not be able to help the rich by buying goods. This means that the economy as a whole will start to slow down since no one will be able to afford anything. Moving on to solvency. Judge, go through with the plan. If you do, we can effectively reform cash bail as we win on harms. We prove how our harms solve, so we will win on all case arguments. Moving on to budgets. There will not be a big impact on the state's general fund because the government is sending relief funds for K-12 education, meaning that there will not be a cut to their budget. And any cash bail saves money because pretrial detention costs about $38 million, while alternatives cost less. If we run the plan, we would be able to save money and use it on the coronavirus and school funding, solving the problem of budgets. That's all I have to say. And vote aye. Okay, so I'm done with my speech and I still have 2 minutes left.
So my first speech was the 1AC speech, and my role when I was reading the 1AC speech was to introduce the affirmative case. And during that speech, I made no mistakes.
My first speech was the 1NC speech, and I set up the 1NC arguments, and I didn't use all my speech time. I had around 20 seconds left.
My speech was a 2AC, and in that speech we read harms, rights, economy, solvency, and responses to budget CA. A common mistake that debaters make is not having a strategically planned cross-ex. I demonstrated that because during my cross-ex, I did not ask good questions, they were not specific, and they also were open-ended.
I gave the 2NC speech, and in that speech, I read arguments in response to the 2AC, and more specifically answers to rights, economy, and solvency. A common mistake that debaters make is ending speeches early, and I demonstrated that by ending my speech with extra time.
I read the 1NR speech/rebuttal, and I didn't use all my rebuttal time. I cited no direct evidence for claims I made in the rebuttal, and I told the judge that I'd be splitting the block in rebuttals instead of mentioning it in the constructive first.
So the second speech that I read was my 1AR speech, and the role of the 1AR speech is to respond to what the 2NC and 1NR speech said. And in my speech, I responded to the rights argument, the economy argument, and solvency. And two common mistakes that I made that debaters often make during a round were that I dropped an argument, I dropped budgets DA during my speech, and another mistake that I made was that I did not use all my time. I had 30 seconds left after I was done speaking.
I gave the 2NR. In that speech, I read arguments in response to the 1AR, and more specifically, answers to rights, economy, and solvency. A common mistake debaters make is not having a lot of clash and ending speeches early, and I demonstrated that by finishing my speech with extra time and not exactly responding to my opponent's speeches. And in the previous speech, the 1AR made the mistake of dropping a DA, specifically budgets DA, and I responded to that by pointing it out to the judge, although I didn't emphasize it clearly.
I also gave the 2AR. In that speech, we read harms, rights, harms, economy, solvency, and budgets. A common mistake that debaters make is not extending. I spent too much time on budgets and not on my own argument, my offense. I did not extend on a single claim that I made, and I had no evidence for anything. But most importantly, I could have led strong in my last speech, but instead I barely had anything to say. I finished my speech within 2 minutes out of the 3.5 minutes that I had. It's essential to use all of your time. Even if you finish your speech, improv on your last 30 seconds because it will matter. And that's all. Thank you.